Børsmorgen hos oss I Finansavisen på plass på dag 2 på Sparebank Markets Energikonferanse her på Grand Hotel I Oslo, der alt fra fornybare folk til oljefolk samles, som de gjør hvert år for å diskutere det som rører seg I bransjen. Mitt navn Marius Lorentzen, her sammen med aksjekommentator Karl Johan Molnes på en dag der Helge Lund, styreleder jo I Novo Nordisk, men akkurat I dag mest styreleder I BP, har en stor dag foran seg. Det slippes en oppdatert strategi fra energigiganten klokken 2 norsk tid I dag. Den ble jo varslet på kvartalspresentasjonen den 11. februar, og kommer etter aktivistinvestor Elliot har kommet inn på eiersiden I BP. Financial Times meldte at I går kveld at USA og Ukraina skal være enige om en mineralavtale, og Trump har sagt at Zelensky kommer til Washington på fredag. Og Nvidia kommer med tall I kveld. Nel og Norse allerede ute med sine, og vi skal snakke med, får jeg si, I formiddag Børsmorgen sjefen I Norse Atlantic om flyselskapets resultater, men I denne sendingen så får vi besøk av Euan Shirlaw I BlueNord og John Hamilton I Panoro Energy, begge med litt utbyttenyheter som verdt å få med seg. Av overskrifter som vi bør notere oss på denne onsdagen, det litt endringer på toppen av meglerhuset Arctic. Petter Bakken, en av gründerne, går av etter, får vi si, det han skriver I hvert fall på LinkedIn, over 35 år I investment banking, og da 18 år I Arctic etter etableringen under finanskrisen der. Lungekreftselskapet Begge meldte I går at de legger ned sin eneste studie, og nå vurderer hvilke muligheter selskapet har videre, om det betyr da salg, fusjon eller noen andre grep. De kommer også med kvartalstall I dag, men det kan bli en brutal kursreaksjon for biotech-selskapet. Sjefen I konsulentselskapet Aribatek går av etter 3 år I den jobben, og det kommer da 50 øre I utbytte opp fra Solstad Maritim, dette selskapet som ble satt inn I strukturen I Solstad Offshore under restruktureringen som Aker regisserte for en tid tilbake. Solstad Offshore på toppen der eier jo da 127 millioner aksjer, så litt hoderegning tilsier jo at de får en rundt 63,5 millioner kroner inn på konto. Ellers, vi merker oss Ventura Offshore falt jo nesten 5% på Oslo Børs I går på meldingen om at brasilianske myndigheter via dette byrået ANP har suspendert deres boreskip Carolina over sikkerhetsbekymringer. Bloomberg rapporterer også at et annet boreskip som jobber for Equinor på Bacalao-prosjektet, den store utbyggingen de holder på med, også suspendert. Det da et boreskip som eies av Valaris. Hovedindeksen hjemme ventet ned drøyt kvartprosenten I går, ventet opp 0,6% I dag, med en Nordsjøolje på rett under $73 fatet, og et asiatisk marked, Karl Johan, hvor vi har sett litt blandede signaler, men Hong Kong steg på nyheter om en satsing på en AI-hub, men vi kan jo kanskje kaste oss over kvartalstallene som har kommet her hjemme før vi begynner å snakke om hvor surt det var på Wall Street I går.
Ja, både Nel og Norse Norse Atlantic ute med tall, og begge har det til felles at de taper mindre enn de gjorde før, men det jo ingen grunn til å kjøpe noen aksjer. Da. Så,
det kan ikke være sånn evig.
Nei, det kan ikke være sånn evig. Norse tappte $35 millioner, og det 30 millioner mindre enn de tappte I fjor I fjerde kvartal på 65 millioner, og Nel 64 millioner I tap mot forventet 88 millioner. Det store penger som renner ut her, og det det ikke det beste klimaet for å drive med hydrogeninvesteringer.
Produsenten roper I øret at du må ha mikrofonen enda litt høyere, Karl. Ja, men fordi vi kan ta Norse kanskje først. Jeg ser, vi skal jo snakke med Bjørn-Tore litt etterpå, men jeg ser jo de retter jo mye fokuset mot Asia, offrer en rute til Miami til sommeren fra London og flyr eller til Bangkok, men Bjørn-Tore har stilt opp med mye kapital over en god periode nå.
Ja, og de ser jo at de har levert tilbake 3 fly og sitter igjen med 11 fly på leasing som de da skal drive videre med, så han kommer jo helt sikkert med en optimistisk outlook på dette her, og da får vi bare høre hva han har å si, men det ikke noen grunn for å kjøpe på tallene for hverken Norse eller Nel.
Veldig anekdotisk fløyen fra Equinors kapitalmarkedsdag her om dagen. Vi var på flyplassen, kom forbi innsjekk til Norse, og det var en flight fra London til USA, der var det smikk fullt av folk, altså. Så det vel et godt tegn. I hvert fall veldig anekdotisk der. Nel da, hydrogenselskapet, vi snakket jo med Sparebank Markets egen Thomas Dowling-Ness her I går. De har jo ikke noe særlig tro på at Nel får det veldig lett fremover, at det kan bli vanskeligere å hente penger.
Jo, og før så hadde Nel alltid 4 år med kontanter da, til å dekke underskudd.
Med reserver, ja.
Ja, og nå det også nede I 1,5 til 2 da, så jeg tror det blir veldig vanskelig I dette her klimaet her for Nel å hente inn penger, og kursen jo også så lav at det ikke så attraktivt lenger, så jeg tror Nel kommer til å få problemer fremover.
Ja. Et lystegn vel kanskje, ordreinngangen var jo opp, så jeg I kvartalet litt grann, men de venter også en høyere ordreinngang i 2025 enn i 2024, og det vel et lystegn i en hydrogenbransje som vi jo vet har problemer. De har jo selv stanset produksjonen på Herøya i Norge.
Men det hjelper ikke, vet du, når estimatene skal tape 458 millioner i 2025, det er 0,5 milliard kroner. Det tapes alt for mye penger. Det er ikke lønnsomt dette her, rett og slett.
Surt.
Ja.
Apropos surt, Mag 7-aksjene er jo under press. Meta hadde jo en veldig bra kule her. Vi får se om Apple kommer best ut av det AI-kjøret til slutt. Men uansett, Nasdaq ned nesten 1,5% i går. Tesla ned over 8%, endte under 1000 milliarder dollar i markedsverdier ute av den famøse trillion dollar-klubben på market cap. Det er ikke bare om dagen, altså.
Nei, de sliter, og problemet er jo at hele det komplekse da er under press det også da, og det er jo retail-investorer som mye som selger nå, fordi Palantir er jo typisk retail-aksje, det er jo retail-kunder som eier det, så nei, og Nvidia-tallene kommer til å bli viktig. Supermicro kommer med tall og viser jo at
de sa at de hadde sendt inn noen dokumenter og skjemaer på Nasdaq for å prøve å ikke bli kastet ut av Nasdaq-børsen.
Og de forteller jo at mye av deres salg er jo gått av det med Nvidia-chips via Singapore som har gått til Kina, da, så det hjelper jo ikke at Trump skal drive og stramme inn så lenge du har at man tillater Supermicro å levere til Kina da, hvis det er det som er målet da.
Nei. Jeg merket meg ellers Lucid, hvis vi først bare holder oss litt på elbil med Saudi-Arabia i ryggen, med voldsom backing finansielt fra kongedømmet. Skjøt i vær i etterhandelen i går, de tappte jo over 0,5 milliard dollar på driften bare på det ene kvartalet. Veldig fancy biler for all del, men de har byttet ut toppsjefen, så det skjer jo litt ting.
Ja, de har Saudi-Arabia i ryggen, så da er jo signalene da at sannsynligvis at de fortsetter å få penger da.
Det kan være, men med ny sjef. Ellers merket jeg meg at Castellum har fått aksept for 12, jeg gjentar 12, ikke 12 000, ikke 12 millioner, men 12 aksjer på budet sitt på Entra, så det blir nok ikke så mye økning i eierandelen deres på 33,3% på det budet der. Budet ligger jo under markedsprisen. Men vi må kanskje på de siste par minuttene vi har før børsåpning, Karl Johan. Jeg vet ikke om du har noe om Petter Bakken, Steffen Rødsjø, så sjømatsjefen skal ta over der. Mats Syversen sier at det hadde ikke vært noe Arctic uten Petter Bakken. Det er kanskje sant?
Ja, jeg kjenner faktisk ikke. Jeg har ikke møtt ham.
Vi får ta mineralavtalen til Trump, da.
Ja.
Vi kunne sikkert brukt 2 minutter på å snakke om gold card som Trump skal selge for å gi folk visum hvis de bare blar opp $5 millioner til USA. Men vi må snakke om mineralavtalen. De skal ha droppet kravet om at inntektene skal gå til å nedbetale en slags sånn gjeld på $500 milliarder til USA, så da har man kanskje fått til en eller annen deal da, hvor nye ressurser i Ukraina skal utvinne, da skal man dele profiten 50-50.
Det var en tullete deal der de krevde money for nothing, og nå har de fått nothing for nothing. Nå skal de starte et fond der pengene skal gå til å investere i Ukraina, men hele dette har enda med at Russland har fått en avtale om å eksportere aluminium til USA. Det henter jo 60% av aluminiumen som USA henter jo fra Kanada, der kommer det tariffer 4. mars da, og samtidig da så har Trump da arrangert flyktninghjelp for oligarker fra Russland, der at de får lov å kjøpe seg statsborgerskap for $5 millioner. Så Trump er den første ottomanske president i USA. Alt der handler om gull, det er gull, og han har kone som er fra slaviske land, og han har sønner som skimer, så det er veldig spesielt, og det var Governors Ball i Washington, og da sang hærens kor, sang da Do You Hear the People Sing fra Les Miserables, så jeg tror det at dette regimet her da, som man må kalle det, som Trump og Elon Musk har, jeg tror ikke det har så lang levetid når Musk går ut og spør på Twitter hva er vitsen med å være president hvis du ikke kan bestemme alt, og du må begynne å sparke dommerne. For det er konstitusjonen som styrer i USA, og det er virkelig et shitshow i USA nå, og dette kommer ikke til å vare.
Nei, men vi 10 sekunder unna en børsåpning. Det blir kanskje en topptreff i DC eller på Mar-a-Lago. Vi får se. Zelenskyj skal i hvert fall til USA på fredag etter planen. Nå åpner Oslo Børs. Og da skal vi jo titte litt på tradingdataene på børsterminalen her, I det handelen I gang på Oslo Børs. Vi følger oss selvfølgelig med på de selskapene som har sluppet tall I dag, men hovedindeksen ser I hvert fall ut til å starte opp 0,2%, litt svakere enn ventet, men likevel da I pluss. Vi har et Bergen Bio som vi skal følge med på, ser ut til at sikringen går fra start, men det ser ut til å bli et brutalt fall på fort nesten 70%. Vi skal I hvert fall holde et øye med den også. Ellers så det jo verdt å merke seg at på topp ellers på omsetningslistene så fortsetter Kongsberg-gruppen opp 1,5%, Hydro opp 1,4%. Karl Johan nevnte jo aluminiumsbransjen. Hydro jo til stede der, får vi si, I USA med fabrikkanlegg. Men USA en stor nettoimportør av aluminium, og det ventes jo ikke noen ny smeltekapasitet I forbindelse med disse tollene. Og så har vi jo, mens vi venter på Bergen Bio, får jeg si, så kan vi jo ta Norse Atlantic som starter ned rundt 0,5%, Nel Hydrogen opp 6,3% fra start. Vi skal ha en kort reklamepause og få en Euan Shirlaw I BlueNord rett etter dette. Welcome tilbake til Børsmorgen. I'm going to switch to English now because we've got Euan Shirlaw, CEO of BlueNord, a Norwegian energy company, as many remember it back in the day. Out with earnings not too long ago and participating on stage here later today. What's the main pitch to investors now? Is it the temptation of dividend payments coming from BlueNord for the first time?
I think that's a big part of it. I think one of the things that we announced in our Q4 results was our first distribution. That was a big
milestone for the
step
company,
for us. Yep. Subject to some things, but it's a reflection of the fact that we've been making good progress with Tyra, which is our big field that will more than double our net production. So I think distributions, dividends, that's the main theme of where we are today. So.
But let's talk about that because a lot of us have been following or have discovered Gas Hub, the website where you can follow Danish production to sort of keep an eye on how the restart at Tyra is going, operated by Total, where you are a partner. And let's just take that because you're saying you're going to pay out $250 million for 2024.
Yes.
Depending on this RBL test. Can you just sort of take us into what sort of testing and when can we expect results that will determine whether this dividend payment goes forward as planned?
Yeah, of course. So it's less that the distribution is subject to that. It's more that the timing of the distribution is subject to that. And I think we're very close. So it's a matter of days or weeks. And it's the RBL completion test is linked to basically having stable gas production at a certain level, which is relatively conservative compared to plateau. So we certainly expect that to happen between kind of late February, which I appreciate we're now in, and early March. That's what we've communicated before.
So you don't have to be at plateau to trigger the...
No, we don't have to be we don't have to be at plateau. We have to be at just a touch under plateau. So our estimate of plateau for gas is around about 265 million standard cubic feet per day, and the completion test is 191. So there's a bit of headroom there.
But sort of give us a overview of the field now, because if you've been trying to pay attention and looked at the data, some days it seems to be not producing, then suddenly it is producing. Is it a sort of binary situation where the field is either on or off plateau, or are there sort of days where it's producing at a mid-level?
So maybe two things there. I think one of the things that we should just all bear in mind is this is a big development project, a lot of infrastructure offshore. And I think when we fully restarted the field in November, you're absolutely right. We did have some days where we were going up and down. I think one of the functions of not only being publicly listed, but also having the EU gas regulations in terms of how we communicate means that we are communicating very transparently, and we are, everybody is we're kind of live blogging the startup of a new field.
Like at the NCS where you could go in
exactly.
the Norwegian
it's
oil
very,
director and look up the data for each field. Yep.
Exactly. It's very, very similar. So I think that's one thing. So we did have some, we had some days where we had good production. We had some days where we had outages. What we've seen since kind of mid-January is we've seen very, very stable production. So it's not binary in the sense that we need to be kind of above a level for a number of days and then you go below it and you start again. It's simply the fact that we have to be above a level on average for 30 days.
And what is the operator Total now saying to you regarding their expectations of the performance of the field moving into now March and the spring.
So one of the big things that we've seen that has been certainly a dramatic success for us has been the HEMJ, so Harald East Middle Jurassic well. That's something that will keep Tyra at plateau for significantly longer. And it's, to give you an example for context, it's currently producing around 50 million standard cubic feet per day. If I mentioned 191 being the RBL completion test number, so it's a roughly 25% of the production from Tyra is coming from one well that we recently drilled. So that's been a big success. And I think, what Total has is I think a positive view going forward in terms of certainly how long we'll be able to keep it plateau for. I think we'll bring our estimates together a little bit in terms of what we think the plateau level actually looks like, but we've certainly guided based on a range that is up to the 30,000 barrels a day that we see.
And when you're now moving into a dividend-paying phase, do you have more work to do in your capital structure in terms of your debt? You still have a convertible bond, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think we did a lot of work last year on resetting the capital structure to make sure it was set so that we could deliver the distributions profile that we've announced, and that's obviously that's a huge part of our story. So I think the work that we did last year unlocked that. For the CB, we've been pretty proactive in the past, looking at how we can optimize the capital structure. I wouldn't expect that to change in any way. I think what I'd say is there's certainly the potential for doing something that ultimately could be beneficial overall to the capital structure. But I guess it's just important that it's important to note it's not something that's going to have any impact on our distributions or how we start that. It's more of a long-term value play from a dilution perspective for shareholders.
But the high yield market is fairly hot these days with a lot of money sloshing around, it seems. So it seems to be an attractive time to going
for sure. I mean, we took advantage
raise some capital.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we took advantage of it back in June last year. I think we've had a good track record of kind of issuing and being in the market. So I guess it's difficult to say anything other than yes, I agree. The high yield market is pretty hot. So
we'll see if any high yield salespeople want to give you a call. Lastly, I want to talk about the European gas market and how you view it now. Equinor said back in their capital markets update, they had an estimate that if the politicians go for a peace deal with Ukraine, that opens up for Russian gas imports again through pipelines. Maybe around the level of 35 BCM is a realistic level of volume coming back into Europe from Russia. We've got fairly low storage now. Prices are under 50 euros again. What is your view on the market this year that you're selling into?
I think I think just to be very open and transparent about it, I don't think anybody knows. I don't think Equinor knows. I'm certainly not going to profess to be an expert in global politics. I think one of the things that I would say, though, is that I think when you think about some Russian flow coming back into the market, I think one thing to bear in mind is so long as the marginal supply comes from LNG and we're competing against Asia for that, that's going to be one of the big things that sets the price for European gas producers. From our perspective, we certainly see that there has been a lot of volatility recently. So one of the main things that we've been trying to do is increase our hedging when we've seen attractive prices as we have over the last couple of months, so that we're at least set to deliver the distribution profile in the way that we've communicated. I think long term, I think there is probably some merit in thinking about what the broader landscape looks like, given how impacted Europe has been over the last couple of years. I think where we benefit is that we've got a new facility. It's modern. It's low OPEX, and that certainly will position us well to the extent that there is volatility going forward.
Do you expect the Danes to try and sort of develop their shelf more than they expected maybe 5 years ago, given the geopolitical situation?
I think there's definitely a recognition in Denmark that Denmark is part of the EU, and Denmark will be one of, if not the largest oil and gas producers in the EU this year. Excludes
as long as Norway's on the outside,
excludes UK and not European Economic Area.
Yeah.
But so I think Denmark will be one of the largest, and I think that role that we can play in terms of helping support energy security more broadly is in the EU. I think is helpful. I think there's definitely a push to maximize recovery, particularly because what Denmark has been is relatively constructive in terms of saying we're not going to produce oil and gas beyond 2050, but what we are going to do is try and make sure that we maximize the contribution before that.
Euan Shirlaw, CEO of BlueNord, thank you so much. We'll be looking out for an RBL update, I guess, then in later this month or in March.
Fantastic. Thank
Have
you very
a good
much.
day. Thank you so much. Vi er
Thank you.
straks tilbake med Hamilton i Panoro rett etter dette. Velkommen tilbake. Jeg skal hoppe rett over til engelsk igjen. Jeg vil si welcome to John Hamilton in Panoro Energy, also going up on stage today. Just for those of you who don't know the company, I mean, you're engaged as an oil producer in Gabon, Equatorial Guinea. Just give us a sort of quick overview of who is Panoro.
Absolutely. Well, we're a main board Oslo listed company, despite my accent, despite the location of our assets. And I think we hold ourselves out as the African specialists. If you look on the stock exchange here, I think most people would associate Panoro with Africa or Africa with Panoro if you're looking to find an oil and gas company that specializes in Africa. And that is really what we're after. We're after a diversified production base, some exploration potential, using our subsurface skills that are, our team have worked in Africa for most of their careers, using our above ground skills, our political connections to make sure that we're as good as we can be in Africa. Good as what we can do. So you're not going to see us going to strange other locations, but Africa is where we've really set out our stall.
And we're going to get to your dividend, but when investors here ask, why should I invest in you and not some of the players on the Norwegian continental shelf or BlueNord in Denmark and other stable countries?
Well, what I would say is we come back to the dividend, I'm sure, the shareholder distributions, I should say, where we're trying to at least compete with some of those players like Aker BP and Vår Energy, Equinor, in terms of that dividend yield, but at the same time offer growth. I mean, we are a company that a few years ago when we first met, we were probably producing a couple thousand barrels a day. We're now producing 12,000 barrels a day. We have about 40 million barrels of reserves. That's good for 10, 12 years of production at current rates. And I think people associate us with doing deals and growing. So we don't want to just be a flatline cash flow generating company that returns all its cash to shareholders. We also want to offer that growth ambition with exposure to exploration, exposure to further M&A. And I think that's how we differentiate ourselves from that pack.
Yeah, let's take the shareholder payouts, because you're basically guiding now a doubling compared to last year's level. You paid out almost 250 million kroners.
Yes.
Got to make sure you keep the currencies because you report in dollars, but you're paid out almost 250 million kroners. You're guiding now for 500 this year. You raised the quarterly guidance now for Q4 from 50 to 80. So that's a sort of 320 run rate, at least for the cash payouts. So the rest then is just buybacks of shares?
Share buybacks or special dividends.
Right.
I think we want to keep some flexibility around that, but we have been buying back shares every day in the market this year. We continue to be in the market every day buying back our shares. So we see that as a very complementary tool to the cash distributions. I have to say that what we do is we return paid-in capital. We don't pay a dividend, which for Norwegians is perhaps
quite
less
lucrative. Yeah.
It is a good thing because it affects the timing of tax. But for international shareholders, what it does is there's no withholding tax coming out, whereas normally there'd be a withholding tax. So also for our expanding international shareholder base, our institutional shareholder base, this is a very, very important nuance that we have in terms of the way we distribute cash.
So you get a cash return with the sort of same tax benefits as a buyback, basically.
Exactly.
But if you sort of rewind a year, you were guiding for 2024 on a payout between 400 and 500 million.
That's right.
So what happened on the way?
So what we did was last year, and some people may or may not remember this, but we set out a target of 400 to 500 million kroner for 2024 based on an average oil price of $85 a barrel. That was what the prevailing oil price was at the time. It's where all the analysts had set their budgets. We obviously in 2024, we've seen quite a lot lower oil prices. So we averaged around $76 a barrel. That delta was worth probably 300 to 400 million kroner of cash flow to the company. That simple $9 delta is quite meaningful. And so we simply cut our cloth accordingly. So despite the fact that it was a year that underperformed on the oil price, we still managed to actually distribute quite handsomely. This year, we're far less sensitive to oil price. That's the beauty of it. So we've set the target at 500 now. but the sensitivity to oil price is far less. We're coming into a period now where we're generating a lot more free cash flow than we were last year. So we're far less sensitive from a distribution perspective on the oil price. So we can withstand $70 oil, $65 oil. It doesn't matter. We'll still be out there buying back shares and distributing cash.
Because on the earnings call, you were talking about 70 compared to 85 last year.
Correct.
So is 70 sort of the threshold
70
that you
sort
need
of
to deliver
feels
500?
about right. I think even if it's a little bit lower, it shouldn't disrupt our plans. But I think it's a useful benchmark just to signal to the market that, look, if oil does go to $40 or $50 a barrel, I mean, we have to consider things. But we're oil price bulls. We actually think it's probably going to go the other way. But nonetheless, it's good, sensible practice to at least set a baseline there. But again, I think the main point is that we are far more flexible this year than we were last year in terms of the ability to distribute cash, even in a lower oil price environment.
But how do you reflect on the sort of expectations you create with shareholders, given the price assumptions you put into that equation? Do you always sort of want to be putting in a price assumption of oil prices somewhere around where we are at the current time when you set those estimates for payouts to shareholders, or do you want to give yourself a sort of $10, $15 buffer?
I think last year when we set it at 85, what was quite clear is that there were a lot of assumptions in terms of our free cash generation by the analysts, and they were all using 85. So we said, let's benchmark it to that so people can see. Right now, we're not anchoring that oil price to what the analysts are saying. We're just anchoring to something that we think is conservative, $70 a barrel. Well, oil price dropped a little bit overnight, but we're comfortably above that at the moment. So I think the guidance to our shareholders is, look, we are not as sensitive to it anymore. Obviously, if oil drops to $50, there's going to have to be a conversation at the board level, I'm sure, but we can easily withstand lower oil prices.
Let's talk about your production, because you last summer you sort of indicated that you would go up to 13,000 barrels a day, which you reached earlier than expected back in the fall. Is that the level you're expecting to sustain throughout the year, or can we see growth beyond that?
I think for the moment, what we've guided the market, yesterday we came out with our Q4 earnings, is that we would produce on average between 11 and 13,000 barrels a day this year. And the gap is really reflecting the fact that on these offshore installations, these FPSOs, you go through maintenance periods, you shut down the FPSO for 2, 3, 4 weeks during the course of the year. So while the run rate may be higher, on average during the course of the year, we set it at 11 to 13. I think when people look at Panoro, I think they can see that this year is going to be a pretty steady year within a band of production, within a band of oil price, the distributions. I think what a lot of people looked at Panoro at, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, is that growth. And we do have some production growth potential organically within the portfolio, maybe not manifesting itself this year, but perhaps next. But we're also looking at the M&A situation. How can we as a company close that discount that we traded a massive discount to NAV? And we believe that part of that is the size of the company. Rather than,
you got like a 15% dividend yield or something.
We have a 15% dividend yield, so that's very attractive, obviously. But I think, and that should hopefully help close that gap a little bit. But we see the prize in being a bigger company, maybe not as big as Vår Energi or Aker BP, but certainly a bigger company, and that can help close the discount to NAV. So I think that production growth can also come from M&A.
Climbing up the ladder a little bit. Well, but let's go on that then, because we've seen a lot of consolidation on the E&P operator side in the business, especially in the U.S. Among the really big players. But if you are going to do inorganic growth through M&A, I mean, you refinanced the loan now just not that long ago. Are you sort of envisioning using your stock at all, or will you need to potentially raise equity, or how can you structure acquisitions if you're going to grow that way?
We issued a bond in November, as you've touched on there, and that was a really important moment for us. I think we felt that we had evolved as a company. We're no longer working on an RBL. I think you talked about with the previous. We felt that the RBL was a fantastic product for it, but issuing the bond was a sort of a step forward for the company. And what it does is, other than reduce our interest rate that we were paying under the RBL, so we've saved a couple hundred basis points by doing it. But it's also sent a big signal into the market saying that we're a Norwegian company. We fly the Norwegian flag in Africa. It's a very good flag in Africa. It's a lot of goodwill towards Norway in Africa. We can demonstrate to sellers of assets. These tend to be the larger oil companies that are selling assets that are less material to them now. that we have access to the Norwegian high yield market. We have access to the equity market if we need it. We do feel our stock is very cheap, and therefore printing new shares for M&A, either the deal has to be really attractive and accretive, or we need to try and do it in creative ways where we're not having to raise equity or very much equity and relying on our cash flow and our cash balances that we have in the company, maintaining the dividend, but also accessing the debt capital markets through the high yield market. So that was an extremely important part, I believe, of our evolution as a company, is getting that bond out there, because it does allow us to look at M&A situations that don't rely on just running around trying to find a whole bunch more equity.
And just to finish off then, when you say M&A inorganic, you're then talking about licenses, companies in the countries you operate, or
correct? Yeah, correct. I mean, I think
so you're not looking to geographically.
No,
expand.
I think we'll stay in Africa. Probably most likely, West Africa is probably our home. I think, and what we see there are not necessarily corporate consolidation like mergers and things like that. Those things can happen as well, but it's more asset disposals by larger companies, and those opportunities exist.
John Hamilton, CEO of Panoro, thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you,
luck up on stage today.
Thank you very much.
Vi tilbake med Børsmorgen rett etter dette. Mens Karl Johan i bakgrunnen her slår en prat med gjestene som på vei videre, så tenkte jeg bare å nevne at Nel ser ut til å få en fantastisk god dag i dag, opp nå 15,3% på Oslo Børs etter meldingen om at det fortsatt underskudd, men underskuddet jo betraktelig mindre enn ventet. Det var jo ventet rundt 55 millioner i minus da på brutto driftsnivå. EBITDA, de leverte da minus 36, ordreinngangen også opp i fjerde kvartal mot fjerde kvartal året før, og de venter også da en høyere ordreinngang i 2025 enn i 2024 i Nel, og det jo, kommer jo godt med da i et marked som ganske krevende, hvor man også da har lagt ned produksjonen i Norge og fokuserer da på produksjonen de har i USA. De har jo en base oppe i Connecticut. 2,54 ligger Nel på nå. Begge Bio ned 77% på Oslo Børs i dag, og det skal godt gjøres å slå den for å utkonkurrere Begge Bio for å bli dagens store børstaper. De legger da ned den eneste studien selskapet hadde gående på behandling av lungekreft, og varsler nå en strategisk gjennomgang for å finne ut hvor man skal gå videre. Hovedindeksen opp 0,3%. Ikke så langt unna det som var ventet. Ellers så får vi jo også legge til at vi har jo flere tall enn fra Nel i dag. Norse Atlantic ned 2,2% på sine, så et relativt lite utslag for den aksjen foreløpig. Som nevnt så får vi jo da med oss Bjørn Tore Larsen i Norse Atlantic her litt senere i formiddag. Nordsjøen 72,68, vi har kommet en god del ned i løpet av uken. Ellers det verdt å merke seg at Kongsberg-gruppen ligger på topp på mest omsatt, 2,2%. ABG faktisk ligger inne på plassen bak, litt tilbakekjøp av egne aksjer, driver opp omsetningen så vidt jeg kan se der i gården. Ellers rundt oss i Europa, grønt jevnt over de fleste indeksene etter en stort sett også positiv start på børsdagen i Asia. Det var Børsmorgen for denne onsdag 25. februar. Vi skal fortsette å dekke energikonferansen her hos Sparebank Markets på Grand Hotel. Bjørn Tore Larsen altså kommer senere. Vi skal også snakke med selskapet som prøver å få gass fra Quebec i Canada. Kanskje LNG kan være løsningen. Så følg med videre. F1 og /TV finner du oss. Ha en strålende onsdag alle sammen. Vi ses.